Forget everything you think you know about fear. Real fear isn't a horror movie. Real fear isn't a jump scare. Real fear is waking up at 3 a.m., completely blind in absolute darkness, hearing something breathe, and realizing the only door in your shelter is behind that sound. That was Tuesday. For your ancestors. That was just Tuesday. And here's the part that should genuinely disturb you. They didn't just survive that moment. They engineered around it. They built entire systems of survival around that single, primal terror. And one of those systems, buried under 200,000 years of concrete and comfort, is still quietly running inside your brain right now. You feel it every time you walk into a restaurant and scan for the exit. Every time you sit with your back to the wall. Every time something in your chest says, "Not that door. That one." That instinct has a name. It has an origin. And it was born inside a camp that had exactly one way in. And one way out. Imagine you have no walls. No locks. No alarm system. No phone to call for help. You have a fire, a few sharpened sticks, and the people sleeping beside you. That's it. That's the entire defense budget of the human species for roughly 200,000 years. The prehistoric world did not sleep quietly. The darkness outside a camp was alive, and not in a poetic way. Predators that we've only ever seen behind glass in a zoo were, for your ancestors, a nightly negotiation. Cave lions twice the size of anything alive today. Hyenas that moved in coordinated packs with bone-crushing force. Giant short-faced bears that could outrun a horse. And then, perhaps the most dangerous presence of all, other human groups competing for the exact same fire, the exact same food, the exact same ground. So how did a small band of maybe 12 to 20 people, exhausted, cold, and vulnerable in the dark, survive night after night for millennia? How did they wake up the next morning at all? The answer wasn't just fire. It wasn't just weapons. It was architecture. Deliberate, calculated, psychologically engineered architecture. And it started with a single, almost obsessive design rule that archaeologists keep uncovering at site after site across every inhabited continent on Earth. One exit. Always one exit. When archaeologists began systematically mapping prehistoric campsite layouts, from the caves of southern France to the ancient rock shelters of South Africa to the open-air settlements of Siberia, they noticed something that shouldn't have been surprising but completely was. These early humans were not randomly scattering their sleeping arrangements. They were engineering them. At sites like Terra Amata in France, estimated to be around 400,000 years old, researchers found the oval outlines of ancient shelters. The entrances were singular, narrow, and, critically, always oriented away from the dominant wind direction and toward the interior of the group's territory. Not toward open wilderness. Toward familiar, known, controllable ground. At Ohalo II in Israel, a camp submerged for nearly 23,000 years before water levels dropped and exposed it, archaeologists found multiple brush huts arranged in a deliberate cluster. Each hut had one opening. And those openings faced inward, toward a central hearth. The fire was not decoration. The fire was the surveillance system. Here is what that design actually meant in practice. If you are sleeping in a shelter with one entrance and a predator, or a rival, approaches, every single person in that shelter is immediately alerted by the same sound, the same shadow crossing the firelight, the same disturbance. There is no confusion about which direction the threat is coming from. There is no split-second decision about which wall to defend. Every body in that structure orients toward one point. Psychologists today call this a choke point. Military strategists call it a funnel. Prehistoric humans had no name for it. They just knew it worked. But the design went even deeper than physical defense. Researchers studying the spatial arrangements of these camps found something remarkable in the social psychology embedded in the layout. The single exit was almost always guarded, not by the strongest individual, but by the most vigilant. Anthropological studies of modern hunter-gatherer groups that still maintain ancient camp structures, like certain communities in the Kalahari and the Amazon basin, show a consistent pattern. The lightest sleepers, often elder members or young adults not yet responsible for infants, position themselves closest to the entrance. Not by assignment. By instinct. By 10,000 generations of learned behavior so deep it no longer required a conscious decision. The camp was not just a place to rest. It was a living, breathing early warning system. Every person in it was a sensor. The layout maximized what each sensor could detect and minimized the variables that could cause a false response or a delayed one. And the fire, always positioned near or just outside the entrance, served a function that goes beyond warmth or cooking. Large predators are instinctively hesitant around open flame. The fire at the entrance was the first line. The human bodies arranged in decreasing vulnerability from entrance to back wall were the second. The narrow opening that forced anything entering to expose itself fully, silhouetted against the firelight, was the third. This was not luck. This was engineering. This was architecture designed by a species that had no formal education, no written language, and no engineering degree, but had something arguably more powerful. Consequence. Every design flaw got someone removed from the gene pool. Every improvement survived another generation. Here is what nobody talks about when they tell this story. The one-exit design wasn't only built to keep things out. It was built to keep people in. Think about that for a moment. In a small band of 12 to 20 individuals, the psychological cohesion of the group was as important as any physical barrier. A group that fragments at the first sign of danger does not survive. Panic is contagious. One person fleeing into the dark could trigger a cascade that scattered the entire group, leaving individuals isolated, which in prehistoric terms was almost always a fatal condition. The single exit created a physical constraint that matched a psychological need. You cannot make an impulsive, panicked exit without passing the most alert people in the group. You cannot disappear into the night unnoticed. The architecture enforced collective decision-making in moments of extreme stress, not through rules, not through authority, but through geometry. Modern research on group behavior under threat confirms what those ancient builders understood without language to describe it. Groups that have a defined, singular focal point for threat response show dramatically higher coordination under pressure. The one-exit camp was essentially a forced agreement. We face this together, or not at all. Your ancestors didn't just survive the night. They survived it as a unit. Because the shelter made individual panic structurally inconvenient. We build our homes with multiple exits now. Fire codes require it. Safety demands it. But somewhere in the architecture of your nervous system, in the part of your brain that still lights up when your back is to a wall and you're facing the door of a crowded room, that ancient calculation is still running. You still want to see the entrance. You still want to know there's only one way something can reach you. The design never left. It just moved inside. So here is the question worth sitting with tonight. When you feel the need to control your exits, in a room, in a relationship, in your own life, are you being cautious? Or are you still, after 200,000 years, just a primate in a one-door shelter, listening to the dark? If questions like this pull at something in you, the deep history, the erased psychology, the truths buried under modern comfort, then you are exactly who this channel exists for. Subscribe to Stick Sapiens. New episodes surface every week from the parts of history that were never meant to be remembered.